Well, greetings everyone. We are now on to lesson number 5, which is the prohibition of forbidden relationships. But before we start right into that, we might take a look and just do a recap of what took place in lesson number 4. So we looked at that balance between responsibility and rights in relation to the prohibition of murder and that we must respect life. And so we also looked at the types of things that fall into the category of murder, be they intentional, unintentional, direct or indirect. And along with that topic, we also spoke about suicide, euthanasia and abortion, which come under the canopy of the prohibition of murder. We also talked about self-defence in terms of being pursuer. Also, under the canopy of murder is the prohibition against gossip and telling tales, and also included contraception and sterilisation. So that's just a brief recap of what we did last week in lesson number 4. So we'll move on now to lesson number 5, and may Hashem's presence guide our lesson today. So the prohibition of forbidden relationships, it's a very interesting topic, and it takes in a lot of different scenarios and warnings, some of which aren't necessarily commanded to the Gentiles. However, logic in some of those prohibitions would tell us that we should take guidance from that. And there will be references to these types of things. So, forbidden relations, what does it include? Well, it talks about sexual partners and acts that are forbidden. It includes what is marital status and divorce and adultery, and also tells us about guarding from forbidden relationships, things we should avoid lest they lead us astray. And then also coming under this category is modesty in actions and dress also. So we'll proceed with this now. Sexual partners and acts that are forbidden can be also drawn from this famous verse in the Torah. That's Genesis 2, verse 24. And here it clearly states, "Therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother and cling to his wife, and they shall become one flesh." And that'll be quoted quite a few times through this class, because most of what we are talking about today is going to stem from this basic fundamental principle here of what is proper. There are 6 sexual acts that are actually forbidden to Gentiles, and they are a capital sin. And I just hope this print is big enough. I was trying to keep things on certain slides so the flow was easier to follow, but print, if you watch it after the recording, you'll probably be able to expand these slides and see it much plainer. So, hello Stephen and Amos, good to see you. So 6 of these sexual acts include a male and his father's current or former wife who is not his mother. So that's forbidden. Certainly a male and his mother. Look, some of these things would you would already know about, but it has some bearing on the future slides as well. Adultery with a married woman, a male and another male, or a female and another female. That refers to homosexuality and lesbianism. a male or female active or passive partner with another species. This is relation to bestiality. And a male and his full sister or half sister from his mother. Okay. Now, it's a bit of it. Forbidden relations, and now of those relationships I just talked about, we're referring now to the forbidden relations that are numbered 1 to 5, and they are derived directly from this verse in Genesis where we read just at the beginning of this class. And so how do we know that's related? Well, Numbers 1 and 2 refer to shall leave his fathers. I've got that underlined. And the father's current wife and his mother. So, you know, the father could have been married before or perhaps divorced now, and he has another wife. So this includes his father's current wife and also his mother, who could be an ex-wife. 3 and 4, these refer to and cling to his wife. Now that refers and means not the wife of another man and not another man, and cling to his wife. Number 5, this specifies human partners. And this comes from where it says, and they shall become one flesh. Now, this here forbids relationships with animals. So, you can, as I said, you can see that this is a linchpin in this whole topic, this class today. So then we move on, and this is continuing on from the previous slide. Number 5 refers to Abraham's statement, Genesis 20:12, which says, "She is my sister, the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother, so she became my wife." Now, the Noahide Code forbids any relationships with a sister or half-sister from the same mother, so from your mother. You share the same mother. But permits marriage with a half-sister from the same father. So if your father married another woman and not your mother, then you can actually marry that half-sister because it's not from your mother. Now, Torah law also permits a Gentile man to marry his niece and a Gentile man to marry 2 sisters. And this comes from Genesis chapter 29, where Jacob married the 2 sisters. And there is, I put here a reference that you can go to the Divine Code 3rd edition, and on page 405, read the footnotes. So there are explanations about that, which I won't go into on this class because we do have a time limit. So, but these are interesting things, aren't they? Interesting. Now, the topic of artificial insemination, now that is permitted for Gentiles, provided the male and female are married, in inverted commas, that is, they are recognised as a couple or partners who are living together. So that is quite okay. They might not be able to conceive naturally, but the parents can undergo a program of artificial insemination. That's quite okay. Just got to keep up with what I'm doing here. Go to the next slide. Now, I need to probably backtrack. Wait a minute. I do. I've missed a section here. Sorry about this. I overlooked, I had written myself a note here. This statement referring to Abraham, where he says she is my sister, the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother, so she became my wife. Now, I've written some reminders here. I haven't included it in the slide simply because it's probably more accurate if I read it. And this is on page 401. There's a footnote number 9, and it says, and I'm going to read it, Rashi on Genesis chapter 20, verse 12. It appears clear that the original source of this prohibition is not from this verse, since it only informs us through Abraham's statement that relationships with a sister from the same mother are forbidden, but not relationships with a half-sister who is only from the same father. Now, the Sanhedrin, in the Tractate of Sanhedrin, it says that this detail was not originally given to Adam with all its specifications, which is the reason why Cain was allowed to marry a full sister. Now, this you might have to think about twice. In brackets, it says, there were twin sisters who were born with him and his brother Abel. So Abel had 2 twin sisters, and Cain had twin sisters that were born with them. The reason for this, in order that the world could be populated through their children. And so it takes again to get a bit get your head around that statement, but remember that this is in the early days. God permitted this, and it's not for us to question, but it does probably answer some questions about, well, who did Cain and Abel marry? You know, people will often ask that, what humans were around. So this was how that was overcome. And it goes on and says, but the Jerusalem Talmud says that the original prohibition of relations with a maternal sister is from the cited verse, therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and cling to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. And the Talmud also discusses the question of whether the prohibition includes only a sister from the same mother, that is either a full sister or a maternal half-sister, or also a paternal sister. And there's another section here I just want to highlight too, on page 409, and it is footnote number 48. And this is Rambam's writings on laws of forbidden sexual relationships. And it goes on here and says that the Kesef Mishnah explains that the specific exemption is only regarding adultery with another man's wife. The prohibition for any other forbidden relationships is from the verse, therefore a man shall leave his wife and his mother, which precludes any sexual relationships with the forbidden family members. But the prohibition of adultery is learned from the continuing verse, and he shall cling to his wife and shall become one flesh, which specifies capital liability for intercourse with another man's wife only when it is in the manner of becoming one flesh, referring to the manner of conceiving a child. Now, the other footnote I wanted to read comes from page 430, and this is footnote 116, and it goes on. This is from Rambam Laws of Kings. A Gentile is liable for cohabitating with a Jewess who is the wife of a Jew, even for cohabitation in normal ways. So there's very strict rules regarding this, and it may be worth reading that if you have a copy online, or a hard copy. And we'll come to that in a little while. So I'm sorry I omitted that. I got too far ahead of myself. Now I'll continue back to the next slide. And this one is the Prohibition. I may have come of homosexual relationships. So a heterosexual marriage between a male and a female is the only context for intercourse and is blessed by God. And we go to Leviticus chapter 18, verses 22 to 23, and I've written them in here. And it says, "You shall not lie with a man as one lies with a woman. It is an abomination. Do not lie with any animal to be contaminated with it. A woman shall not stand before an animal for mating. It is a perversion." So now goes on further here, and we say homosexuality and lesbianism is forbidden. It is an abomination. Homosexual or lesbian relationships with minors, that is children, is called pedophilia. It's a reportable crime in most judicial systems throughout the world, and certainly punishable by law. And I just thought it was relevant to put this bit in because we're seeing more and more of this in society. You turn on the news, there's all sorts of cases where this is happening, and it's just it's just beyond understanding how this the perversions in the world nowadays have just gone beyond comprehension, really. Now, this is another big topic, and you will see lots of references to this. It's called sexual reassignment surgery, SRS for short, and that's absolutely forbidden. So this is where one gender wants to change into another. A male wants to become a female, or a female wants to become a male. So this sexual reassignment surgery does not change a person's gender status in Torah law. So if you're born a male, you are a male. If you're born a female, you are a female. Now, there are a couple of exceptions to this. It is possible for someone to be born with both genders, but this is not pertaining to that. So if you're born a male, an intact male or an intact female, that's what you are. Now, surgery damages the body, and while it's permissible when someone needs to have something removed, a growth or a damaged organ, a gallbladder, things like this, we're not talking about medical issues here, although they still do damage the body, but they're permitted. This type of sexual reassignment, it is not medically required, and it is definitely not permissible. It's purely and simply for licentious purposes. So it is a big no-no. Now, just thought I'd spend a bit of time here just defining perhaps what marriage according to the Noahide Code. And here we see in Isaiah chapter 45, verse 18, it says, "For thus said Hashem, creator of the heavens, he is the God, the one who fashioned the earth and its maker. He established it. He did not create it for emptiness. He fashioned it to be inhabited. I am Hashem and there is no other." So clearly he's saying, we've got, you can't just have 3 or 4 people. He didn't create it for just half a dozen people. He created it for be inhabited, and that requires a population. Continuing on, a male and female cohabitate as a couple or partners with or without children, or that meaning they're living together. Now, or they're known as partners in marriage with or without a formal ceremony, contract, or registration of a marriage. So this again, is a bit eye-opening. So in actual fact, a male and a female who fall in love and decide to get married aren't required to actually enter into some sort of marriage ceremony, as in going to a idol worshipping church and having some sort of ceremony and celebration after. Marriage in the eyes of God is when a male and a female form a partnership together, live in the same house, and live as a husband and wife by traditional standards would be. That's a marriage. That's a marriage. And they're recognised and known as a couple, but they haven't. Or, well, they may have gone through a formal ceremony. They could have. Or they may not have gone through a formal ceremony, as we call it, or registered their marriage in the births, deaths and marriages register, what have you. Now, continuing on, this is interesting. A Gentile woman may leave her husband as soon as she wishes. In other words, she can leave any time. And the husband is not required to provide for her. However, the customs and laws of that country that you live in could be involved. For example, there will be some guidelines and laws regarding provision for the spouse, maybe, but certainly if they had children resulting from that union, there would be some secular laws regarding the responsibility there. So it's getting interesting. So the woman can dissolve the marriage and leave whenever she likes, and she is then considered, that is, moves out of the, or ceases to cohabitate with the partner, and she is then considered not married. And therefore, if she was to develop another partnership with a different man, that is not adultery. So, but whatever they're cohabitating and living, together as husband and wife, neither partner, the male or the female, has God's permission to enter into a relationship with another member of the opposite sex, because that would then be considered adultery. However, when the partnership is dissolved, when one party leaves, then it is a different matter. Now, there is a strong recommendation here that a couple should have some sort of binding stipulation between each other when they become partners and become one, a partnership together. And Rabbi Emmanuel Shockett provides a text for this, and it is, again, in the Divine Code 3rd edition. It's on page 442, and I did earmark it here somewhere. Yes, here it is. Again, beg your pardon. It is, I'll just show it to you so that you can see. It's here. You'll see the green tab there. And it is well worth taking a look at that, because that is actually an approved, it's been done with rabbinical approval, and that is actually a marriage contract or partnership contract between Gentile male and female, and it's quite legal, perfectly legal, and you can have that drawn up, whether you're going through, because what it does, it states certain specifications in there, and I would urge you to take advantage of that, or share that with people that might be getting married that aren't of, people who follow the Jewish guidelines of marriage, etc. So there's some interesting things we've discovered, aren't they? And moving on now. Continuing on, it is forbidden for a Gentile man to marry a Jewess, that's a female Jew. It's forbidden for a Gentile female to marry a Jew. In cases like this where one partner is not of the Jewish faith and they firmly want to marry, then the non-Jew has to convert. Now that is, go through a formal Orthodox guided conversion, not go into one of the Reform or conservative Jewish churches where that's allowed, because that is putting the person who's a Jew in mortal danger, and also it's not correct. It's not the thing to do. So one partner has to then go through the formal Orthodox conversion. It's not forbidden, but it's they can marry, but they both have to be Jews. Put it that way. Forbidden for a Gentile person to live with a Jewish person, meaning as in cohabitate in the secular arrangement that we previously talked about. That's forbidden. And we come down to Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 3, where it highlights this. It says quite strongly here, you shall not intermarry with them. You shall not give your daughter to his son, and you shall not take his daughter for your son. So those guidelines are fairly clear there, aren't they? Okay, now modesty. This is modesty is a manner of guarding against forbidden activity or influences or influencing other people to sin. And this, the prohibition for Jews are extensive, and they are very, very clearly outlined step by step. There's no way that they have left a stone unturned, so to speak, when it comes to this question of who you can't be, of behaviours and that are not good. In other words, how shall I say? You've got, the Jewish law for secluding themselves from certain activities and people is very clear. Now, the generation following the flood were extremely cautious regarding forbidden relationships, and because they knew that prior to the flood, what God deemed as forbidden relationships ran rampant in the time prior to the flood. And Genesis chapter 6, verse 2 gives us some pre-flood insight. And I'm just going to read that. And this is in relation to modesty. And it says, the sons of the rulers saw that the daughters of man were good, and they took themselves wives from whoever they choose. So the meaning here is that the offspring of Seth, who was a righteous person, was enticed by these godless, depraved cultures, and they suffered the fate that actually destroyed mankind, which of course was a catastrophic flood. So there's, once you know the background to these things, it makes one understand why these guidelines are put in place. So this modesty is not just how you dress, but it's also how you behave and even speak. Now, this is important, and I just want to explain this first. Women, all women, have an obligation to act and dress modestly. And there's that old saying, don't put a stumbling block before the blind. And the reason for this is that modesty, it's a proper expression of our loving respect for God and God's creation of mankind who he made in his image. So it's a respect for all mankind. And it's also respect for your fellow man. And as I said, not to place a stumbling block before the blind. And the Divine Code here has a footnote, which I'll refer to now. And 6, 9. And I want to read this because I just want, again, I want to get the context correct here. And so this is 469, footnote 219, but I'll just refer to a topic in it, section number 9. It says, it is proper that a married woman cover her hair when outside her house or in the presence of men other than her husband. Now, the footnote directly associated with that, I will continue to read. This is from the Tractate Sanhedrin 58a, and it states that this was the custom of Gentile women in Talmudic times and earlier times as a clear sign to distinguish married women from single women. Even though it is not customary for Gentile women to do so nowadays, in many societies, a modest and pious married woman should nevertheless cover her hair. This is a requirement for Jewish women once they have become married, as defined within Torah law. Now, I just want to explain something here because sometimes this gets, I see this getting coming into arguments and topics that there's no command for a non-Jewish person to cover their hair. They're correct about that. However, it's like some other things. We're not commanded to obey our parents and honour them, are we? But logic and human principles would tell us that that is the correct thing to do. No one is going to criticize a non-Jewish woman for covering her hair, although there are other religions, of course, that do this. They're not going to criticize you, but it is encouraged. And I know there's even one rabbi that I know of that is of the opinion that non-Jewish women that cover their hair are trying to imitate Jews. Well, I don't think that's quite correct, because it is interesting to me to note how many women now who aren't Jewish are actually covering their hair. I mean, a lot of African women do, so covering a woman's hair is not unique just to the Jewish faith. So while it's a personal choice for a woman to cover her hair, a non-Jewish woman to cover her hair, it is encouraged and it's a good thing to do, but there's no law to say you have to do it. The main thing is about modesty in actions and dress. But I just wanted to highlight that. I myself cover my hair. I've done a video on that, and I say that that's between me and my God, but it's also, and it's certainly out of respect for him, it reminds me who I am and to behave as I should, and I do it out of respect for my my family, for my sons as well. So we move on here, and we're coming into now what is called rules of seclusion, and this is also very interesting. Now, again, a bit like the modest dress, I meant to say too in that section on modest dress that I should just go back to that so there's no confusion for anyone watching this after the. So when I say that women are obligated to act and dress modestly, And I know there's also in the secular world people saying, well, a woman should be able to walk down the street in a bikini and not be assaulted or not be this, that, and the other. Now, look, that's true. That is true. However, do you really think logically that that is the correct thing to do? Would one not think you're looking for attention or you have no respect for your body or what have you? I think we have to be realistic about this. Women need to set an example that makes people respect her and her sacred space, so to speak. So one can't walk down the street wearing a bikini and then expect the population to hold her in high esteem and respect because of her modesty. Bikini or swimsuit has a place, certainly. When you're swimming, you're in the water. But and you see women and men who have gone to the exercise parlour or what are they, the gym, and then they proceed to go into the supermarket and shop in skin tight active wear with a lot of skin showing and every shape and every angle showing. And I find, even as a woman, I find that offensive. I find that offensive. And so if I find it offensive, other people must feel the same way. And let's face it, we have all seen some sights in supermarkets we wish our eyes had never glazed over. So I think sometimes people need to have a look in the mirror before they leave the house. Now, these rules of seclusion are not actually specifically stated for Gentiles. However, again, logic would imply that caution is required. I always say, you know, we need to take an example from the Jews. That doesn't mean we're adopting all their laws and practices, but we need to ask, why were the Jews given this ruling? Is there some message in that for Gentiles as well? And again, we go to page 471, footnote 24. Again, I don't want to misinterpret things. I prefer to read it. And so I'm going to read this now. So it's on page 471, footnote 224. And it says, the prohibition of seclusion for Gentiles is not stated explicitly, but such seclusion is logically correct, as it is the greatest cause of forbidden relations. And this comes from Laws of Forbidden Sexual Relations from Rambam. And it goes on and it says that although these they're not an explicitly commanded precaution given to Gentiles from God, it is an added logical precaution that helps people to guard themselves and also to guard other people that may be in your presence. There are people out there who have no concept of, how shall I say, of boundaries. They have no respect or feel that they need to respect you. So you don't need to be giving them a reason to operate in a disrespectful manner. So we do need to be very careful of who we are behind closed doors with. And I'm going to just see. I'll go back. Now, this question here of seclusion, I just want to bring some clarity for this. In today's society, I think that both male and female, particularly males, we need to be conscious of who we isolate ourselves with. You know, if it's possible, leave a door open. Now, I'm not talking about for Gentiles, our close immediate relatives, our sisters, cousins, brothers and sisters, what have you. But when you're with a stranger, and I'm speaking now from my experience, past experience as a nurse, whereby there were certain things that I felt we could improve on for our patient. And I'll give you an example. If I knew that a male patient I was assigned was certainly of the Islamic faith or the Jewish faith, I would certainly ask them, would they prefer to have a male nurse attend to them? Now, some of them said, yes, thank you very much. And nowadays we do have quite a number of male nurses available in all healthcare settings. So that's a blessing. And as I said, some of them did appreciate that and want that, and others would say, no, and sometimes they were too sick to care. And I am myself a bit the same way. If I was in hospital just for a routine procedure or something, certainly I would much prefer a female nurse to be bathing me if necessary or doing things for me. But on the other hand, if I'm in an accident and I'm gravely ill, I don't care who's rendering assistance. There's a place for everything. So we need to respect people's preferences, and sometimes it is not appropriate for a female to be doing things for a male or a male to be doing things for a female. Now, having said that, without getting too far off the track, school teachers and things like that have parameters they have to abide by, seclusion with children and things like that. And I think we need to just be a little bit careful about that out there in the real world. Those of us that have had those sort of backgrounds or jobs or teachings that teach us those things, we find it quite normal and easy to do. But other people sometimes don't understand why those things are put in place. They're not just put in place for the person that you're negotiating or caring for or teaching or working with or writing up a contract with, it could be a contract for a house, anything. But you also need in turn to safeguard yourself. Now, believe it or not, there are some people that will go and misrepresent actions or speech when they leave some meeting, and it can come back to be very disastrous. And again, I harp on men to be particularly careful with this. As you would realise, doctors, if they have to do some sort of an examination on a male doctor that is, they will call a nurse in, a practice nurse, to come and be there as well, and you would want that. Now, the doctors, whether they're male or female, will do that. So don't be naive and think that you can't be falsely accused of something, or someone might misinterpret something that you've said quite innocently. So I think males today in the world need to be particularly careful to protect themselves about certain things. So if you're comfortable with the people and it's a work colleague and you've known them for years, you probably shared photos, her grandkids and your grandkids or whatever. I'm not talking about those sort of things. But, when you're not sure of something, just be very cautious. Leave a door open, call a third party in, just for legal purposes as well. I mean, I often did that. If I had to discipline a staff member over not just that they didn't make the bed correctly. I don't mean something as simple as that. But if it was an issue, I would always suggest they had a witness and I would have one. So there would be two independent people in there, so there could be no misunderstanding about what was said and who said what. So I have strayed off the track a bit. But it is, in today's society, you just need to be really careful, really careful. And I guess the way to end around this discussion off is to say, my favourite saying is always, if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's probably going to be a duck. So be cautious, be safeguard yourself and other people. So I hope this has shed some light on the relationships that are prohibited and the relationships that are allowable. And I know a couple of things are a little bit hard to grasp, but it is Torah based. There is a background to all of this, and what I have presented in this lesson is again a very condensed version. There's a lot more detail involved, but suffice to say that the Torah contains guidelines for every possible situation in life. And then there's a reason that we have to abide by certain restrictions. Even if they're not commanded to us as Noahides, we need to look at what the context of that is, and is there a message in this for us? So just be cautious, and we can't always, there's an old saying, if you want to command respect or you want to be respected, then that can only be achieved through your actions and your behaviour. So if you're going to be a loudmouth person out there telling lurid jokes and, dressing inappropriately and showing off too much flesh, then it is going to be hard for someone to come along and have respect for you, because what you're advertising by the manner in which you dress and the speech that's coming from your mouth is certainly not going to be what everyone perceives as a respectable human being. The rules about modesty are probably a little bit more intense for females, because males, most males can dress modestly, just, they wear a shirt and shorts or long pants or whatever. So it's not hard for a man to dress modestly. They do it most days of their life. But for women, it can, the high-end fashion influence can sometimes make women become quite, how shall I say, they're not thinking how they look to themselves, not how they're going to look to other people or people they don't know. And look, I guarantee you can go and sit in a busy street somewhere, just on a street bench, and just take notice of the people that walk past and the people that stare at them. I'm not going to say any more, but I'm sure we will understand what I'm speaking about. So I especially implore women to guard their modesty and as respect to yourself, and also out of respect for your fellow man as well. Not everybody wants to see bare skin in their face. All right. Well, that will be the close of this lesson. I just close by saying, let the focus of our hearts and minds always be on Hashem. Always be careful, think twice, and we can't go wrong. So I'm going to end this recording now, and any of you that are here and want to ask some questions, please do so. I'm ending the recording.